So I have a couple of challenges for you today. I want you to really think about these challenges. The first one is I want every person in this church who is seated on this side, next week, I want you to sit over there. You're laughing. And if you're over here, next week, I want to see you over here. You know why? The reason why is because we are people of habits. You know, we sit in the same place, we do the same things, we walk the same way, we sing the same way, we do it all the same way. And the reality is, sometimes when we get into these habitual things, we stop seeing what needs to be seen. If you sit on the other side, you will find that you will see things and hear things and observe things that you otherwise would not do. So that's challenge number one. Move to the other side. The second thing I want to do is I want to challenge you to study the Scriptures. Not just read them. I know we read them and we read them in church. We just read from the Gospel of Matthew. You know, we read the Scriptures throughout the time. However, how many of us spend time actually studying the Scriptures? Because, after all, if we don't understand the context of the readings that we've heard, how can they change us? How can they influence our lives? A great example is our first reading. This reading from the book of Kings about the visitation of Elisha to this woman's house. Now, what do we know about this woman? Well, they say she is a person of influence, which in those days means she was someone who was wealthy. And this is how the Scriptures can be brought to life if you have an understanding of what they mean. In those times, in ancient Israel, if a person was rich, the thought was that person was being gifted by God. The outward sign of you being gifted by God is that you're rich. So, why is Elisha going to visit her? After all, isn't he already graced by the Lord? The answer comes in her story, which is humility. Because she's a humble woman. Even though she has a lot of money, she is a humble woman. First of all, she invites Elisha to come and dine with her every time he passes through town. She doesn't have to do it. She does it because it's a gift to him. And, you know, what needs to be understood about that is that she goes the extra mile. Because not only does she invite him to a house, she and her husband decide they're going to build a room for him, so that he can stay with them, so that they can learn from him. That's what we all have to do. We have to wait upon the Lord. And when we encounter him, we need to learn from him. And I talked about humility. Here's the true humility in the first reading. The humility is that this rich woman does not have a son. And understand, the way that you maintained your property over the generations was through the sons. And if you didn't have a son, you had no one to give your things away to. And so, she has no son. But she doesn't ask Elisha to pray to God that she have a son. She says nothing. She is humble. It's Elisha who says, what can be done for her? And the servant, how beautiful, comes from the servant. The servant says, yes, there's something you can do. She has no son, and she needs one. And Elisha then tells her, you are going to have a baby within a year. Beautiful story. A story where if you don't understand the context, it doesn't have the same meaning. Let's talk about, very briefly, the gospel. This is one that people are, struggling with. It's hard. Because what does Jesus say? Hey, if you don't love me more than you love your family, then you're not worthy of me. I mean, think about that. You love your parents, you love your children, you love your grandchildren. My grandchildren are right here, in the row here. They came from California. So, what family for us means just about everything. But the reality is that Jesus is asking for us to do something more than that. Jesus isn't saying you shouldn't love your mother, your son, your husband, your wife, your children, your grandchildren. He's not saying that. He's not saying you should not love them. He wants you to love them. And you should love each other. But what Jesus is telling us is, even in the midst of that, you should love the Lord more. And may the praise be to Jesus Christ, who is Lord.